Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Facebook chat. We're here on Earth Day, on the 40th anniversary of Earth Day, and we're thrilled that you could join us online. Thanks for being here. I'm Greg Nelson, the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, and we're thrilled to have you with us today. Joining me is Carol Browner, the Assistant to the President for Energy and Climate Change, and Carol's going to be answering your questions today. Just a couple of quick reminders. Please, if you have questions, go to, and enter them into the Facebook chat. We're doing this online. You can go to whitehouse.gov/live, and you can see the chat from there. If you go to whitehouse.gov, you'll see the blog postings that set it up, and you can find the Facebook link from there. So we'll be taking questions off Facebook all day, and I'm going to turn over to Carol for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Greg, and let me thank all of you who joined us on today's blog. I was able to be with some of you about 3 months ago, and I thought we might just start with a little update on some of the things we've been doing, and then obviously I want to answer your questions. We continue to focus on how do we build a clean energy future for our country? How do we really make sure we put in place all of the right mechanisms so that we can compete in the global clean energy economy? And we're very encouraged. We've seen the promise of new clean energy jobs delivered through investments in the Recovery Act. It's putting us on track to create or save more than 700,000 jobs while doubling renewable energy generation by 2012. We finalized the car rule, setting the toughest fuel efficiency standards ever for automobiles. Congress had said in 2020 we needed to get to 35 miles per gallon. By working with the industry, we were able to get to 35.5 miles per gallon on average by 2016. And to set the first ever greenhouse gas emission standards, working again with the state of California, with other states, and the car companies. The EPA and the DOT deserve a lot of credit for making this happen, and we're pleased with this outcome. We're also leading by example with the federal government-wide greenhouse gas emission reduction of 28% by 2020. This is the equivalent of taking 17 million cars off the road for 1 year and $8 to $11 billion in avoided energy costs. The president believes, the administration believes, it's very important that we lead by example. And so across the federal government, federal agencies and departments have developed their plans for reducing their energy use and for looking at how they can use alternatives, more efficiency, and really leading the way for the people of this country. As you know, it's Earth Day, and yesterday the administration kicked off a whole series of events in celebration of the 30th anniversary of Earth Day. Vice President Biden announced a selection of 25 communities who will receive a total of $452 million in Recovery Act funding to ramp up energy efficiency building retrofits in their communities. Local governments, private sector, nonprofit organizations will all be working together on pioneering and innovative programs for concentrated and broad-based retrofit of neighborhoods and towns, and hopefully entire states and ultimately the entire country. These programs are expected to save households and businesses about $100 million annually in utility bills, while leveraging private sector resources to create what funding recipients estimate to be about 30,000 jobs across the country during the next 3 years. In honor of Earth Day, our cabinet officials have fanned out across the country, participating in educational programs with school children, visiting wetlands, coastal restoration projects, community service projects. And later today, the president will host a reception here at the White House. And on Sunday, he will join a large event down on the mall here in Washington by video, speaking to the folks in attendance there. We continue to look at Congress and to work with Congress to secure passage of comprehensive energy reform and more opportunities in terms of clean energy jobs. We're pleased that a House committee recently passed the Homestar program, which would provide consumers with upfront rebates on investments in things like insulation, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, and windows that have been proven to save energy. And so with that, we again thank you for joining us on the 40th anniversary of Earth Day and are happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, they're flowing in, and once again, if you go to whitehouse.gov, you'll find links to the Facebook chat, and you can put in your questions from there. So the first one we're going to take is from Andrea. Andrea asks, what is the administration doing to help make renewable energy more affordable, specifically for homes and businesses?
Well, Andrea, we're doing two things. First, there was the Recovery Act. The Recovery Act is the single largest investment in renewable energy generation in the history of our country, and we think that we can double the amount of renewable energy generation. And we're already seeing, the President and I, seeing solar farms, wind farms coming online all across the country. The President and I were in Florida not too long ago, where we visited a very large solar farm. The President has visited a number of these facilities across the country. In terms of individuals, the Recovery Act also created a set of tax credits for certain purchase of certain energy efficiency, air conditioning, insulation, other materials for your home. And as I just said, we're looking to extend that program through Homestar legislation, which has now passed out of a House committee, and we have bipartisan support in the Senate. And so we're encouraged that we're going to be able to give families and homeowners and people these opportunities going forward.
Great, thanks. We're going to take one now from Daryl talking about smart grid. Daryl asks about how can we help keep the focus both on energy conservation, but also looking at smart grid and specifically in businesses. There's a huge opportunity for efficiency if we can give them the tools to do it.
Couldn't agree more that we need to stay not just focused on generation, but also on the delivery system. And in the Recovery Act, we were able to secure billions of funds to make the grid bigger, better, smarter. We need to make it bigger so that we can carry renewables from where they're best located to where people live. We need to make it better in terms of how we manage the flow of electricity. There's a lot of leakage. We lose a lot of electricity. There are upgrades to the system to help us manage better and to prevent blackouts. And finally, we need to make it smarter. And part of making it smarter is giving individuals access to information. We're part of the Recovery Act. Will be making investments in meters, smart meters for people's homes and businesses, so that you'll have the opportunity to understand how much electricity an appliance is using, how much electricity you're using at a given time of day, and make decisions about how you might use less electricity. You know, one thing we've learned, and I've learned throughout my career working on environmental and energy issues, is the more access we give people to information, the better able they'll make decisions and become a part of helping to solve a problem. And folks I know who already have these meters in their home are discovering some things that are changing their behavior. For example, one gentleman told me that after he got a smart meter, he realized that while he had 2 stereos in his home, one used about twice as much energy as the other. Now, his experience of these stereos were exactly the same, and so now he's become an informed consumer. He's thinking about, when it comes time to buy another stereo, making sure that he's getting the most efficient one.
Great. Thanks, Carol. One other question along these lines. Michael asked us, what are our thoughts on nuclear power and what's the administration doing to pursue new nuclear power plants?
The President and the administration, we all believe that nuclear power is going to be an important part of our energy future. And we just issued the first loan guarantee for a nuclear power plant in 30 years. The Congress had appropriated this money back in 2005. The former administration did not take advantage of it. We have now gone ahead and got that program up and operating. There are other loan guarantee applications in the queue, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some more loan guarantees. One of the things that happened is, because we weren't building nuclear power plants in this country, all of the infrastructure, the manufacturing, the knowledge necessary to really build these facilities was somewhat lost. And so we're not only building new facilities, but we have to rebuild the infrastructure and create not just the construction jobs, but also the manufacturing jobs associated with this industry. And so while we're working to offer loan guarantees with companies who will build these, we're also making investments in clean energy manufacturing. For example, there were tax credits in the Recovery Act of, I think, $2.5 billion for clean energy manufacturing, and we've asked Congress to extend that program. It was oversubscribed, which is the good news. Lots of folks out across America want to build new clean energy manufacturing facilities, and we want to make sure that we can give them the incentives to do that.
Thanks, Carol. There's a lot of questions about the upcoming climate and energy legislation, and a couple folks asking for updates on what's happening and when we can expect to see some of that move.
Well, thank you for that question. As I think most people probably know, the House has already passed energy legislation, and the Senate, 2 committees have taken action on various component parts. And now Senator Kerry of Massachusetts, Senator Graham of South Carolina, and Joe Lieberman of Connecticut have formed a bipartisan group that have been working with the environmental community, with industry, to develop comprehensive energy legislation. And they are going to present that on Monday. We have obviously been working with them and are very encouraged by this bipartisan group and the progress they're making. We continue to believe that comprehensive energy legislation is very important to our country's future. It's important because we need to start breaking our dependence on foreign oil. Secondly, we need to create a new generation of clean energy jobs. And third, we need to put a cap on the dangerous carbon pollution. Right now, what we see is other parts of the world making decisions and giving businesses predictability and certainty so that businesses will make capital investments, build more turbines, build more solar panels. We need to give American businesses that same certainty and predictability. And the best way to do that is through comprehensive energy legislation. If we set the right standards, then we'll be able to make the investments here in the United States that will create a different energy future for our country. Nobody, as the president says, wants to be second best. And obviously, we read regularly stories about what other countries are doing, China leading the way on renewables. There is a global clean energy revolution. The United States should be at the front of that revolution, and the best way for us to do that is to create the right incentives here at home.
That's great, thanks. Two other questions on the energy and efficiency side, and then we'll change gears a little bit. One is, Michael Lee asked what the administration is doing to ensure that we're going to have renewable energy capacity here in the U.S., talking about foreign competition and creating a market, and I know that ties back into some of the legislation.
Michael, I think you're exactly right, which is there is this global competition that we need to have the right domestic incentives so that we can compete in the global market. But let me maybe make it a little simpler. What Fortune 100 company CEOs tell me regularly is that they want to build the turbines here, they want to build the solar panels here, but to do that they have to know they're going to be able to sell them here. And the most important thing we can do is create that guaranteed market. And the way we create that guaranteed market is through the right standards. And that's what the legislation, what comprehensive energy and climate legislation would do for us. It would give these businesses prepared to make the investments the certainty that they need. Other parts of the world are putting in place requirements of how many turbines they're going to buy, how many solar panels they're going to buy. We haven't done that yet in the United States. Now, some of our states have done it through setting renewable electricity standards, but we believe there needs to be a national program if we're really going to be able to create the jobs, clean energy jobs here in the United States that will allow us to compete in this global demand for clean energy technologies.
All right, thanks, Carol. I'm going to do one more question on energy-related topics. Homestar legislation, we mentioned it in the intro. A lot of people have shown some interest in it, wanting to know what they can do both as homeowners and also as folks who are interested in retrofitting. Can you talk a little bit more about it and how people can tie into it?
So this is a bill moving through Congress. It has not yet passed the Congress. We are eager to see its passage because we do think it's important because of the opportunities it will give families, homeowners, building owners in terms of making efficiency upgrades. It would target a list of efficiency activities, for example, insulation, heating and air conditioning, and people would be able to get a rebate for making these improvements. When they purchase the insulation and the insulation is installed, there'd be a rebate that would be made available. And so we're going to continue to work with Congress to move this bill. As I mentioned, it's passed out of a committee. Now it needs to move through the rest of the House. And then in the Senate, we have bipartisan support, and hopefully we'll see some action there soon. It's also important that what this does for people in terms of the opportunities to make your home more efficient, it also creates jobs. It's a very important job creator because for every piece of insulation installed, there's somebody who has to do that installation. And so we're interested in it both for the job creation and also for the efficiency opportunities.
There's a series of questions here about kind of looking at the next generation, both of entrepreneurs and individuals and students, talking about STEM education, and then also Mary Ann asked us about university funding and looking at how we're going to build more R&D funding. Can you talk about how that might tie into the technology and energy resources needed?
The administration believes that we must make significant investments in research and development and clean energy research and development, and have sent to Congress in our budget a significant request across the federal government, whether it be the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, all of the parts of the federal government that look at the clean energy technology issues. We have made some investments. We believe we need to make more, and we're asking Congress to provide the dollars to do that. Obviously, that means working with our universities and colleges, where a lot of the expertise lies, and making investments in university and colleges so that we can continue to see the cutting-edge work that will allow us to lead the clean energy revolution.
And I said we were going to move on to a different topic, but we got a great one. So Karen Coyne asked about if there's been a discussion about the security impacts of climate change and how that might play out.
Yes, and I will tell you there are people who are security experts who are quite concerned about the global security impacts, whether it be sea level rise, whether it be storm impacts. They worry about these. There's any number of organizations that we've met with over the last year, representing security experts, representing former vets, concerned about security issues, and what they're all saying is we've got to start to take the steps to put in place the safeguards so that we can avoid some of the problems, and then ultimately we may have to manage some of the problems through adaptation.
Great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. It is Earth Day. I'm thinking about the broader environmental perspective. We got a great question here asking, what's the administration's approach been to protecting some of the delicate ecosystems, things like the Everglades and the Great Lakes, and thinking not just about the water itself, but the full ecosystem?
Well, I'm not sure where that question came from, but I'm a native Floridian and spent many years working on the Everglades issues, and then when I ran the EPA for 8 years looking at other ecosystems across the country. And the question was exactly right. We have to think about these as ecosystems. We can't simply think about one or two problems, one or two solutions. We have to think comprehensively. And the administration, working through the Department of Interior, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Council on Environmental Quality, recognizes the need for these comprehensive approaches, and is trying to put in place all of the right mechanisms so that we're making decisions and developing plans that are thinking about these as an entire resource as opposed to the bits and pieces.
Great. And a number of questions, even as we're talking about ecosystems, looking back at the climate change and energy legislation, wanting to address specifically the importance of having a carbon cap, having some kind of limits.
Well, we certainly think that putting a cap on dangerous carbon pollution is important. I think the Carrie Graham Lieberman effort is looking at how best to achieve reductions from various sectors that emit these dangerous pollutants, and they may, I think it's likely that they'll end up using slightly different tools for each sector, but I think that can make a lot of sense because it's taking into account the realities of those sectors. Now, we've used a cap previously on the electric utilities. It was very successful in reducing acid rain. It was successful at not only reducing the acid rain, but doing it more quickly and at a cheaper cost than anyone had anticipated. But certainly we need to be about reducing these dangerous pollutants, and so we are encouraged that Carrie Graham Lieberman are looking at a variety of tools that will get those necessary reductions.
Great. One other question, looking at the local perspective on a lot of this, are there things that people can do on an individual basis, both in their homes and their businesses, that can contribute, especially on a day like Earth Day, where we're talking about grassroots investments, and then also looking at sort of small energy investors and people who might want to make renewable energy investments in a local community or on their homes?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to make sure people understand what may be available, whether it's through the Recovery Act, in terms of the tax credits that we created if we're successful in passing Homestar, which we hope we will be. That will create some more opportunities. Frequently, state and local government also have opportunities. Recovery Act has funded a lot of state and local government programs, and so there may be opportunities for in terms of local programs that homeowners and businesses, small businesses can participate in. The second thing is I think it's important, as I said previously, become familiar with your own energy use. Become an informed consumer. Learn about programs like Energy Star. Learn what your options are in terms of reducing your own energy. And I think that what we find is that when people become knowledgeable, then they make a better consumer choice.
Great. A number of questions have been asked about the international perspective and looking at what's happening internationally to cooperate on clean energy and on carbon emissions reductions. You were in Copenhagen. If you could talk a bit about both the perspective there and then what's happened in the last couple of months.
Yes, I had the opportunity to be with the president in Copenhagen in December, and I think it's fair to say that President Obama really provided the leadership for reaching the agreement that was achieved there. And it is an important agreement. For the first time ever, you have countries, China, India, agreeing to put forward their domestic plans, and everyone looking at what are they doing domestically and then sharing that internationally. We had not had that previously. Obviously, there are ongoing discussions about what are the next steps. There'll be more meetings on the international front, but I think it's important to recognize the level of cooperation and the significance of China and India, particularly coming forward in Copenhagen.
Back to the local level, again, a lot of questions looking at how people can thinking about Homestar and also thinking about local investments. What are the money-saving opportunities? We're all worried about the economy, about jobs, and what are some of the things that people can do that invest in energy and help them save money?
Well, for most homeowners, understanding your energy use, and then as you begin to replace appliances, looking for the most efficient appliances that will give you the services that you need can be hugely important. But even simple things like turning off your lights can be an important contribution in terms of efficiency, and making sure that our children understand that they have a role to play can be important. Obviously, for people who have the resources to take advantage of some of the tax credits and make some investments, insulation, windows can be very, very important investments. Now, that's not true for every single home, so you need to become knowledgeable and understand if it's going to give you the kind of outcome that you want. But certainly for some families, those can be quite significant and important investments with relatively quick paybacks.
Great. A number of questions on different aspects of transportation's role in all of this. I know you mentioned the car rule up front, but if you could talk a bit about both vehicles, but also looking at trains, mass transit, some of the investments that have been made, and what people can expect to see.
The Recovery Act is actually making a historic level of investments in rapid mass transit. And that is an industry that has not grown significantly in the United States. We think by making these investments, we can help it to grow and really get a foothold. On cars, not only did we set the toughest ever fuel efficiency standards, which will save drivers money virtually from the beginning because they'll be using less gas to drive. But we're also looking at what are some of the new technologies, for example, plug-in hybrids, electrification. I think it's fair to say that in our lifetimes we will see a very, very different fleet, 30, 40 years from now, that the cars we will drive in will be very different than the cars we're driving today. And we're making the investments in terms of the R&D to make sure that we really understand how we do that and what it's going to take to actually get there.
Getting back to efficiency for a minute, we had a couple questions about appliances and appliance standards, and that so much of the energy coming off the grid is energy that's not being used at the time that it's being gone into appliances that aren't actively on. Are the things that people can do in looking at Energy Star, looking at their own appliances and other tax credits available?
Energy Star is obviously a wealth of information, and I think that the work that EPA does and the leadership they provide, and then the work that DOE is doing on efficiency are extremely important. The Energy Star label gives you access to information so you can be an informed consumer, but also it's important to note what the Department of Energy is doing, which they actually set standards which require the manufacturers of certain categories of appliances to make those appliances more efficient. I think under Dr. Chu's leadership at the Department of Energy, they've already set a half a dozen or more new appliance efficiency standards, and sometimes those are for commercial appliances and sometimes for residential appliances. But they are committed to making sure that as a consumer we have good choices about efficient appliances.
One other question, you talked a bit up front about federal leadership, and you could talk a bit about what's going on in the cabinet. I know that some of the cabinet members are out today, but looking at transmission issues on public lands, looking at investments at DOE, looking at biofuels at USDA.
One of the things this administration has done is really tried to work across agency and department lines and to weave together authorities. So for example, the car rule, the legal authority that was used to set those requirements for more fuel-efficient cars was a combination of EPA and DOT authorities put together. What the car manufacturer said to the administration is, we don't need two sets of rules. Can you please give us one so we can do a better job? And by giving them one set of rules, the EPA and DOT working together, we were able to get greater fuel efficiency for consumers faster than we might otherwise have been able to. Similarly, we've got a group of agencies working together on transmission lines. There are a lot of players in the federal government when it comes to the siting of a transmission line. The people who build lines obviously were frustrated by this. They asked us if we could simplify the process. We've now reached an agreement among, I think, 7 or 8 federal agencies and departments to do just that. A lot of cooperation between EPA and the Department of Energy. We try and get together what we call the Green Cabinet every month or so and talk through issues. When we started this at the beginning of the administration, almost a year and a half ago now, we thought there would be about 4 or 5 agencies and departments, the heads of which the cabinet members would want to participate. Sometimes we're up to 10 or 11, and it's everything from the Secretary of the Navy to the Small Business Administration. I think that's just a testament to the ways in which this administration is not only committed to a clean energy future, but also that we really want to use all of the tools available to us.
Great. A couple questions that just came in about looking at investments in batteries and plug-in vehicles. I've heard the Vice President talk about this as well. Could you talk a bit about what transformation we've seen in that industry?
The Recovery Act also allowed us to make significant investments in battery technology, in the facilities to manufacture batteries. We're excited about the progress that's being made there. And when we think about our cars and trucks of the future, certainly batteries are going to play a very important role. We need to make further advances in terms of the technology. People are committed to that, but there are some opportunities today, and we're using the Recovery Act money to take advantage of those opportunities.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, and it's been about sort of looking at the federal leadership side once again. Talk a little bit more about the executive order on federal leadership and what we're trying to do to encourage agencies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
The President signed an executive order several months ago directing each agency and department to develop an efficiency plan, if you will, to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, to use energy more efficiently. And it was really remarkable, the response. This effort was led by Nancy Sutley at the Council on Environmental Quality. They worked closely with all of the agencies and departments, and a significant reduction as we move forward to implement this. It's interesting that the leader was the Department of Defense. They took this challenge very seriously and brought forward a proposal that's, I think, more than 20% a reduction over the lifetime of the program. And so we do believe that federal leadership is important, and we're putting our money where our mouth is and doing what we're asking other people to do. Let me close by just thanking all of you again for joining us here on Earth Day, the 40th anniversary of Earth Day. We've made a lot of progress in this country in terms of clean air and clean water, but we all need to continue to work together. We need to work together to secure passage of Homestar. We need to work together to secure passage of comprehensive energy and climate legislation. We believe that these are very important steps for the people of this country, and we're committed to doing everything we can to make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I want to reiterate that to find out more information about what's going on in the administration on environmental and energy issues and what's happening on Earth Day over the next couple of days, go to whitehouse.gov/Earth Day. Thanks again.